Here with us now is Democratic Congressman from Washington, Adam Smith. Congressman, welcome. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. President Trump is saying the war never would have happened if he was president in 2022. You are the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee. What do you make of this phone call between Trump and Putin? What role do you see the U.S. playing as we move forward?
Well, I think the role is going to be crucial, and there's two big things. First of all, we need to keep supporting Ukraine. It's very problematic that President Trump, as a candidate, opposed the supplemental package that would continue to support Ukraine that we passed last year. I mean, without that, Ukraine wouldn't be able to defend themselves, and Putin would be able to take, well, as much as Ukraine as he wants, and he said very clearly that he wants it all. So first, we have to make sure that we give Ukraine the ability to defend itself. But second, we do need a negotiated settlement, and I think the U.S. can play a strong role in that. I think we should directly interact with Russia. We should bring Ukraine into the conversations as well, of course. But look, this war is devastating to Ukraine, but also to the broader world. And the only way out is a negotiated settlement. So I think President Trump should play a strong role in trying to get to that negotiated settlement. But again, I want to emphasize cutting Ukraine off as a starting point is not to get you to a negotiated settlement.
Well, not only does Mr. Trump say he's going to meet with Putin, he also wants to meet with Vladimir Zelensky. What do you expect from this meeting, Congressman? Ukraine has largely relied on U.S. support in the last 3 years during this war.
Well, Ukraine has largely relied on a 53-nation coalition that is supporting it on a per capita basis. I mean, the U.S. is like 13th or 14th in terms of what's being provided. So countries all across Europe and elsewhere have been helpful to Ukraine. We should not forget that. I expect it's going to be difficult. I mean, look, Ukraine has every right to want all of their territory back. They don't have the military means to get it. It's not realistic right now. And Putin basically doesn't seem to care about the cost of the war. I mean, the estimates are that Russia has suffered some 700,000 casualties since this war started, and he continues to press forward. So it's going to be difficult, but I think it needs to be done. We need to get to a peace agreement on the Ukraine war.
Back here in the States, sir, we've seen Trump's plans to dramatically cut the federal government. Your thoughts on how he's going about this? And it also appears to keep the Democrats off their game. What will you and your party do to stop Trump's agenda?
Well, look, what he's doing is it's autocracy. It is a violation of the law and a violation of the Constitution. We have passed and put into law the funding for a wide variety of different programs, and no one person can block that, not legally, not within the Constitution. Elon Musk and Donald Trump have come in and simply stopped funding programs that are in law, and that's illegal. You can't do that. You want to have a debate going forward. I mean, we're debating the FY25 budget right now, and FY26 is coming. Sure, we can debate that. But once something's in law, to cut those programs off, and they've been randomly freezing them. In my state, we have a program from the Department of Interior to help fund wildfire prevention. They just shut off the funds, and we're desperately trying to get them turned back on. Internationally, foreign aid programs, commitments that the U.S. has made. Now, if you want to say we shouldn't have made those commitments in the first place, we can have that debate about foreign aid. But we made commitments, and people are literally starving to death across the world because we pulled back on those commitments. We cut the money off after it was approved and put into law. So this is illegal. This is wrong. We're supposed to be a nation of laws in the Constitution, not one person. So I think it's deeply troubling on that side. And then you can have the debate about what should the federal government spend its money on. And I'm in favor of greater efficiency, a greater effectiveness, looking at how we deal with the debt and the deficit. One final point, you do all of that. You're cutting off programs to prevent wildfires and feed poor children. And in place, you want to do $7 trillion in tax cuts. There's nothing fiscally responsible about that. Please don't fall for the idea that this is about getting our fiscal house in order. Not if you want to cut taxes by $7 trillion.
Looking at your state, while a majority of your district did not vote for Trump, over 1.5 million people did. What are you hearing from your constituents on both sides of the aisle, Congressman?
No, look, I mean, the primary thing I'm hearing from my constituents, and remember, I've got a 70% Democratic district, they're angry, they're upset, they're worried about a variety of different programs that are being attacked, and the way the president is doing his presidency. As I said, It's autocracy. He's not paying against the law. Now you saw the tweet from Elon Musk who thinks that the judiciary shouldn't exist. If they enforce the law, now he's going to try to impeach the judges and throw them out. It seems that what Donald Trump and Elon Musk want is they want to be able to do whatever they want to do, whenever they want to do it, and not have anybody who can impede them. Now, let's be generous for the moment and say that what they want to do is better for the country. I can debate that point, but it's certainly not better for a constitutional republic to eliminate the influence of anybody but two people. And my constituents are concerned about that. All of that said, I've spent a lot of time talking about how my constituents are also concerned about how Democrats are governing. Crime is a problem. Homelessness is a problem. Drug abuse is a problem. Efficient government is a problem. So I'm working on all of that. But I don't think the solution to that is autocracy.
On the first day of the new Congress, we saw House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and House Speaker Mike Johnson call for bipartisanship. Have you seen any path forward to work with your Republican colleagues thus far?
Well, not right now. After the election, they won, so the Republicans are feeling quite confident that they don't need us, and they're pressing forward in a variety of different ways. But look, reality is going to come home. I mean, I mentioned the FY25 budget. The FY25 budget actually started last October 1st. But we still haven't passed the appropriations bills, and the CR runs out on March 14th, which means the government would shut down at that point. Republicans historically have been unable to pass funding bills with only Republican votes. And as your chart is showing, they have a very narrow majority. We're trying to get an agreement on what the top line should be, but there's considerable concern about that. So right now, it's pretty partisan, but as we get to the place where you actually have to get things done, those conversations and dialogues will go forward. Let me just say, I'm friends with Speaker Mike Johnson. I work with him on a lot of things. Mike Rogers is the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee. I'm the ranking member. We work very closely together. There are conversations going on. But right now, the Republicans are taking very much, hey, we won with less than 50% of the vote, by the way. So we're in charge, and now we're going to force our ideas down everybody's throat. And we'll see how that plays out. It's obviously going to hit a fork in the road here pretty soon.
We're seeing that already with so many lawsuits. Congressman Adam Smith, thank you. Really appreciate your time, sir.
Thanks for the chance.
A Trump administration plan to place USAID workers on leave is currently on hold after a federal judge blocked